In the early morning hours of the 1st of October 1978, a woman in her 20s had been at the Conservatory Disco on 3rd Street in Covington, Kentucky. She got into her car and went across the street to a King Quick grocery store. She stopped by to buy herself a packet of cigarettes and left. As she drove to her home on St. Joseph Street in Park Hills, a man began to follow her. At 2 a.m, she was getting out of the car in the garage when a man rushed up and grabbed her from behind. He started choking her and threatening to take her life if she made any noise. The man shut the victim's car door and forced her into his car before driving into a lane just down the road between two buildings. He removed his clothes and demanded her to do the same thing before indecently assaulting her and forcing her to perform lewd acts against her will for the next 2 hours. When the attacker wanted the woman to act like a 14-year-old but couldn't do it to his satisfaction, he burned her with cigarettes, slapped her in the face and beat her up. After the horrifying ordeal was over, she went to the police, who were then able to collect fingerprints from her car door. A composite sketch of the attacker was drawn, but no suspects were identified and the case went cold. In 2019, cold case detectives were investigating similar unsolved crimes in the area to that of the Park Hills offence. While looking, there was notes on the file from a case officer who worked on the matter years ago, along with evidence of fingerprints from the car, believed to have been left by the assailant. The fingerprints were submitted to a national computer database and were found to have matched the now 78-year-old suspect, Michael Dean Tate. The reason there wasn't a hit during the initial investigation was because fingerprinting technology was fairly new back then and the database was very limited, so when they resubmitted the prints to the FBI database, they got a hit this time. Their investigation confirmed Tate's presence in the Cincinnati area in the mid-1970s when he was working as a travelling salesman. Investigators travelled to meet with the victim, who no longer lives in the area. She said that she didn't know anyone by the name of Michael Tate, and there should be no reason why his fingerprints would be on the car, other than him being the attacker. The authorities then went to Tate's home to interview him. Tate admitted to having violated a woman in Kentucky that he grabbed from behind, but he wasn't sure of the exact date. He then went on to admit to more indecent assaults in at least 2 additional states. He was arrested at his Georgian home on the 14th of November 2019. On the 30th of November 2020, Tate pleaded guilty in court to kidnapping and indecent assault. He'll make his final court appearance on the 12th of January 2021, where he'll be expected to be sentenced to 12 years in jail. In the interim, further investigative work is underway for other attacks committed by Tate, likely resulting in further jail time. Kenton County Commonwealth Attorney Rob Sanders said, "This was the most amazing police work he's ever seen," and applauded the cold case detectives. He also said that the victim was relieved that she wouldn't have to return back to Kentucky for a trial. Most of all, she was very appreciative of those who took up the investigation and continued to fight for her, even though 4 decades had passed. At around 1:50 p.m. on the 24th of September 1988, a man in his mid-20s entered a gift shop in St. Petersburg, Florida. He approached a 51-year-old woman who was working alone and asked her for assistance. Whilst chatting, and without warning, he suddenly pulled out a knife and ordered the woman into a back room, where he battered and violated her while holding her at knife point, threatening to take her life. After the attacker fled the scene, the authorities were contacted. Once they arrived, they collected evidence from the crime scene, including foreign DNA from the victim through a testing kit, but no suspects were identified. 6 years later, in 1994, Pinellas County detectives reviewed the case, conducted further interviews, and submitted additional evidence to the forensic lab for testing. Based on that review, in 1996, investigators developed a DNA profile from the evidence and entered it into the CODIS DNA database, which was established in 1990 after the crime was committed. The investigators looked at several suspects, but eliminated them through DNA analysis, or because they were in jail at the time of the offence, and the case went cold. The case was reopened in November of 2017, when the cold case detectives were assigned to review the matter, but even then, there were no hits in the CODIS database. On the 6th of September 2019, after using genetic genealogy and comparing the DNA found at the crime scene to distant relatives, the authorities were able to review family trees of ancestors and narrow the search down to 54-year-old Larry Eugene Gould as a suspect. Gould was 23 and lived in Pinellas County at the time of the offence. He moved to Gallatin, Tennessee in the years that followed. The victim is now 82 years of age. Detectives contacted the Gallatin Police Department and the Sumner County District Attorney's Office in Tennessee for assistance. On the 15th of November 2019, Gallatin Police obtained a search warrant to collect DNA buccal swab directly from Gould. The sample was sent to the DNA lab for testing. On the 7th of January 2020, Pinellas County Sheriff detectives were notified that the DNA sample collected from Gould matched the previously unidentified DNA collected from the victim in 1988. A few days later, on the 10th of January 2020, Gould was taken into custody by the Gallatin police and interviewed. According to the authorities, Gould did not dispute the DNA evidence, but denied ever violating anyone. He mentioned that he would have consensual relations with people in their open businesses within minutes of meeting them. Gould has been charged with indecent assault and is still awaiting trial to this day.